For decades, Johnny Cash stood tall as one of the most iconic voices in American music. He was the man in black, a rebel, a poet, and a preacher all in one. With his deep, haunting voice and unapologetic honesty, Cash became the voice of the downtrodden, the sinner, and the saved. But behind that powerful persona was a man fighting demons so dark, even his closest friends couldn't always reach him. His songs spoke of redemption, pain, and faith, but they were also cries from a man trapped in a lifelong battle with addiction, heartbreak, and his own conscience. To the world, Johnny Cash was untouchable, a living legend who had survived it all. But as fame grew, so did the shadows. Pills, loneliness, and self-destruction became his constant companions. Even when he found salvation in love and faith, his body carried the scars of years spent chasing peace through chaos. And though his black attire became a symbol of defiance, it also masked a truth too painful to reveal, that beneath the legend was a man slowly falling apart. Now, decades after his passing, the world is finally learning the full story of Johnny Cash's secret battle. A story not of fame and fortune, but of faith and forgiveness. Because for all his triumphs, Johnny's greatest struggle was never against the world. It was against himself. And what he left behind is more than music. It's a testament to the price of pain, the power of redemption, and the haunting truth that even legends bleed. Before the legend, before the fame, Johnny Cash was just J.R. Cash, a poor farm boy from Kingsland, Arkansas, born into a world of hardship. Growing up during the Great Depression, he learned early what it meant to suffer. His family toiled endlessly in the cotton fields, their hands blistered and backs bent, fighting to survive each season. But even then, young Johnny had something different inside him, a voice that carried pain, power, and promise. He would sing hymns with his mother, while his father, Ray Cash, battled his own demons of anger and disappointment. Tragedy struck early when Johnny's older brother, Jack, was killed in a horrific sawmill accident. The event shattered the family, and Johnny most of all. He was just 12, and the guilt of losing his brother would haunt him for the rest of his life. He often said he felt like God took the wrong son. That grief carved a permanent scar in his heart, one that would echo through his music for decades. After serving in the U.S. Air Force, Johnny returned home with a dream: to make music that told the truth. Not the polished, shallow kind that filled radios, but songs that spoke for the broken and the damned. His voice was unlike anything Nashville had ever heard, deep, raw, and full of conviction. Hits like Folsom Prison Blues and I Walk the Line turned him into an instant sensation. But even as his star rose, the darkness inside him grew louder. The man in black persona became both armor and confession. He said he wore black for the poor and the beaten down, but it was also for himself, for his own sins, his own pain, and his endless search for redemption. To the audience it looked like rebellion. To Johnny it was mourning. Behind the stage lights, his life was unraveling. The pressures of fame, constant touring, and the ghost of his brother's memory drove him toward the one thing that seemed to quiet the pain: pills. At first it was just a way to stay awake, to keep performing. But soon it became something darker, something he couldn't control. The man who sang of walking the line was now slowly crossing it. By the early 1960s, the world saw Johnny Cash as a superstar, but inside, he was crumbling. The drugs, the guilt, and the sleepless nights had begun to consume him. He was running from something he couldn't escape, himself. And though no one knew it then, the real battle, the one that would define his entire life, had only just begun. By the mid-1960s, Johnny Cash was on top of the world, at least that's what everyone thought. He was selling out arenas, topping charts, and redefining country music with every record. But fame is a double-edged sword, and for Johnny, it cut deep. Behind the curtain, he was fighting a war no spotlight could reveal. Pills had become his lifeline, uppers to keep him going, downers to help him sleep, and painkillers to silence the torment he carried since childhood. His friends and bandmates watched helplessly as he began to change. The once sharp, determined singer became erratic, unpredictable, and often vanished for days at a time. He would disappear into the desert with nothing but a bag of pills, a bottle, and his Bible. One time, after a 3-day binge, he was found nearly dead in a cave near Chattanooga, Tennessee. He later said that in that cave, surrounded by darkness and hallucinations, he met God, or at least the idea of him. But when he stumbled out, weak and trembling, the addiction was still there, waiting. June Carter, the woman who would eventually save him, had been watching from the sidelines. She saw the pain behind his piercing eyes, the loneliness that no stage or crowd could fill. While the world idolized the man in black, June saw the broken man behind the myth. She would pray for him, talk to him when no one else could, and pull him back from the edge time and again. But not even love could always reach him. In 1965, Cash's career hit rock bottom. His performances were erratic, his voice often slurred, and he was banned from the Grand Ole Opry after smashing the stage lights in a drug-fueled rage. His marriage fell apart, his reputation crumbled, and his body began to fail him. He was hollow, a legend living on borrowed time. The turning point came when June and his mother staged an intervention. They locked him in his home, determined to help him detox. For days, Johnny suffered through withdrawal, sweating, shaking, and hallucinating. But for the first time in years, he wanted to fight. He later said, "God saved me through that woman." And slowly, with June's help, he began to rebuild his life. That redemption wasn't instant. The scars of addiction never fully left him. But something inside Johnny changed. He began to see his suffering as part of a larger story, one that connected him to every lost soul he sang for. His concerts became sermons, his songs confessions. When he recorded Folsom Prison Blues live at Folsom Prison in 1968, it wasn't just entertainment, it was empathy. He sang to those inmates as equals, not as criminals. He knew what it meant to feel trapped, and for the first time, his pain had purpose. Still, the fight never truly ended. Even in moments of triumph, the darkness lingered. He once said, "I'm not a Christian artist. I'm a sinner who sings about grace." That was Johnny, honest, flawed, and human to his core. By the end of the decade, he had risen from the ashes. But behind the reborn image of the faithful man stood the truth. His battles were never behind him, only quieter. The man in black had found redemption, yes, but he wore that black not just for others anymore. He wore it as a reminder of who he used to be and what it cost to survive. After years of chaos and heartbreak, Johnny Cash finally began to find something resembling peace. The man who had once been consumed by darkness was now walking a path of light, though not without scars. With June Carter by his side, he found the strength to rebuild his faith, his family, and his music. Together, they became one of country music's most beloved duos, their love story written in every lyric, every glance shared on stage. By the early 1970s, Cash was no longer just a performer. He was a symbol of hope. He had faced his demons and lived to tell the tale. His weekly television show, The Johnny Cash Show, brought gospel and truth into millions of homes, breaking barriers between country, rock, and folk. He gave a voice to the voiceless, from prisoners to veterans, from the poor to the broken-hearted. Every song he sang carried the weight of redemption, but peace didn't come easy. Inside, Johnny still wrestled with guilt, the memory of his brother Jack, the years lost to addiction, and the constant feeling that he had to prove he deserved his second chance. He poured that pain into music. Albums like Man in Black and American Recordings were confessions in melody, raw and unfiltered. His voice, aged and gravelly, carried more truth than any polished production ever could. As time passed, his health began to decline. Years of touring, stress, and old habits had taken their toll. He developed diabetes, neuropathy, and a weakened immune system. But even as his body failed, his spirit burned brighter than ever. June remained his anchor, his guardian angel, until tragedy struck once again. In 2003, June Carter Cash passed away, leaving Johnny devastated. Those who knew him said he was never the same. In his grief, he turned back to the only thing that ever gave him peace: music. Barely able to stand, with his hands trembling, he recorded some of the most haunting songs of his life. Among them was his cover of Hurt, a raw, heartbreaking reflection on pain, loss, and redemption. The music video, showing an aged Cash surrounded by memories of his past, became one of the most powerful farewells in music history. When asked why he recorded Hurt, Johnny simply said, "I see no reason to deny what I've been. I've seen life, death, and everything in between. This is my truth." Those words summed up the man he had become, brutally honest, humbled by suffering, and still searching for grace until the very end. Just months after June's passing, on September 12, 2003, Johnny Cash took his final breath. The world mourned the loss of a legend, but more than that, the loss of a man who had lived, stumbled, fallen, and risen again, all before our eyes. He wasn't perfect, and he never pretended to be. But that's what made him real. Johnny Cash's legacy isn't just in the songs he sang, it's in the truth he lived. He showed the world that even in darkness there can be light. That even after heartbreak, there can be redemption, and that even the man in black, burdened with pain and regret, could still find peace in the arms of grace. Because in the end, Johnny Cash wasn't just the voice of the broken. He was the broken. And that's why his voice will never die. When Johnny Cash passed away, the world didn't just lose a musician. It lost a storyteller, a preacher, and a poet of the human soul. His deep voice, once the sound of rebellion and pain, had become a hymn for the broken-hearted. Even after his death, the power of his music continued to echo, not just through the speakers of old records, but through every artist who ever dared to sing with truth. Johnny Cash was more than a country star. He was the embodiment of struggle and survival. His life was proof that pain doesn't have to define us. It can refine us. From the cotton fields of Arkansas to the bright lights of Nashville, from prison stages to the world's grandest halls, Cash carried the same message: faith, forgiveness, and the fight for redemption. He spoke to prisoners, outcasts, and believers alike, reminding them that no one is too far gone to be saved. After his passing, tributes poured in from across the globe. Musicians from every genre, rock, gospel, blues, and country, called him a hero. Bob Dylan once said, "Johnny was and is the North Star. You could guide your ship by him." Even in silence, his voice guided others. His songs like Ring of Fire, I Walk the Line, Folsom Prison Blues, and Hurt remained timeless, each one carrying a piece of his soul. But perhaps Johnny's greatest legacy was the honesty he left behind. He never hid his scars. He sang about sin, regret, and grace because he had lived them all. He showed the world that faith isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Through his life, we learned that even when the world turns its back on you, redemption is still possible. June Carter's love, his mother's prayers, and his belief in God became the foundation that held him up when fame and fortune couldn't. And in his final years, when the spotlight faded, Johnny found peace in simplicity, reading his Bible, writing songs and recording his truths. His last albums, stripped of glamour, captured his essence better than anything before. A man unafraid to face his mortality, singing straight to heaven. In the decades since his death, new generations continue to discover his story and find themselves within it. Because Johnny Cash wasn't just singing to us, he was singing for us. For every person who's fallen and gotten back up, for everyone who's loved and lost, for anyone who's ever felt unworthy of grace. His voice remains a companion in the darkness. Today, when you hear that deep, trembling voice sing, "And you could have it all, my empire of dirt," it still pierces the heart like a prayer. Johnny Cash turned his suffering into salvation, not only for himself, but for the millions who found hope in his words. He was called the Man in Black, but through his pain, he brought light. And that light, born from honesty, faith, and redemption, continues to shine long after the music stopped. Because Johnny Cash didn't just leave behind songs, he left behind a truth, that no matter how lost we become, grace will always find us, even in the darkest night.